Okay. Who's good at following directions? Who's good at reading a map? Tim? Peter? Okay. See, our generation, we didn't really grow up reading maps. You know, by the time we got to the age where we needed to, we're using GPS, and now everything's on your phone, isn't it? So if you need to go somewhere, we just put it in the phone and follow it. But it's a good skill to be able to follow directions, isn't it? Yeah? Now I remember, Ken's not here. I can tell this story. I was wondering, should I tell this story or not? A few years ago, when we went on holiday, we'd rented a villa, and it was probably the second day or something like that, and we'd just been to the beach, we'd been exploring, and then we were heading back to the villa. So we were driving along the road, and I saw the turning, and I thought, this is the turning that we go down. And what happened? Ken just drove us straight past. So there was me, Esther, we were in the back, and there was Ken and Jane in the front, and Ken just drove straight past. And I said, Ken, I think the turning was there. He's like, no, it isn't. Yeah, I mean, you know what it's like, don't you? No, it wasn't. And I just thought, okay, you know, I'm just gonna let this unfold then. You know, we've got nothing else to do, so let's just let this unfold. So we kept driving. About 5 minutes passed. I could see Ken looking around. He's like fidgeting a bit. I'm thinking, if he doesn't realise by now, he's going to soon realise he was wrong, and I don't need to say anything. I just kept going a little bit more, and at this point, we ended up out in the sticks somewhere, and down near these hills, didn't we, Jane? Yeah. And they got to a point, didn't they? Maybe about 10, 15 minutes later, and there's just a silence in the car, and then he just goes, "So you think it was back there, do you?" Like, yes, it was back there. But following directions is a good skill, and God has a plan for our life, you know, and do we listen to the blueprint that he puts out? It might not be as straight and narrow as we think, and I think God is very good at course correctness, but there's a general gist of this is the destination, this is where he'd like us to end up, and maybe the route that we take there might be a bit, you know, zigzaggy, we go all over the place, but God can always reroute us. But we have to make sure we've got our priorities in order. Now, what do you think is a picture of God's love? If you just had to sum it up in maybe a sentence or a paragraph, what would that look like to you? What is God's love? You don't have to throw anything out, but just think about it. If someone asks you, maybe just a friend at work or just someone in the street, and they said, "What is God's love?" What would you say? It can be quite probing, can't it? To have to actually vocalize that. And now, imagine this. Imagine that you've never been to church in your life. Okay, so because we have so much culture and almost churchology that we put on and we focus on, but imagine you've never been to a church before in your life, and all you've had is the Bible. You've just read the Bible again and again, through and through. What do you think your image, your perspective of what God's love is would be? Does that make sense? Do you think there would be any differences, any deviations? See, the Bible tells us, Proverbs, it says to guard your heart above all things, for it determines the course of your life. And I think that's probably one of the things we're not so good at doing, guarding our heart. See, the Bible tells us to guard our heart, but most people, we just like to follow our heart, don't we? Yeah? Yeah? Now, John 14:22, it says this. Then Judas, not Judas Iscariot, it has to just clarify that, doesn't it? It's like, don't worry, it's not that Judas. Then Judas, but not Judas Iscariot, said, "But Lord, why do you intend to show yourself to us and not to the world?" Jesus replied, "Anyone who loves me will obey my teaching. My Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. Anyone who does not love me will not obey my teaching or my commandments," some translations could say. So this is quite an interesting picture of love, because here there's a direct correlation between, if you love something, there will be cooperation, won't there? There will be an understanding. Now remember, this culture, it was very used to formalities and teaching and structure with rabbis and this kind of thing. So it's easy for him to translate that and say, look, if you love me, if you value me, if you follow me, there will be a great effort and emphasis placed on my teachings. Yeah? That it won't just be a feeling that comes and goes, but it will be something that we build our life upon. Now, Matthew 22:36 says this, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." Now, we know this, don't we? We know this stuff. Anyone who's been in church for a decent amount of time will know this. But we can so easily lose its importance. What does that mean? What are the implications there? Teacher, what is the greatest commandment? Imagine you've got access to Jesus right now. He walks in and you say to him, God, Jesus, in the flesh, Jesus, I need you to teach me. What is the greatest commandment or the most important thing you've ever taught on? That if I can implement one thing into my life that you say, God, what would it be? Out of the whole Bible, all of Scripture, what is one thing that you need me to know? And what does he say? To love the Lord your God with everything. And the second is much like it. To love your neighbor as yourself. Isn't that interesting? See, because we can, I remember when at Bible college, and you get to study all kinds of interesting things. You know, you can spend all year looking at one section of the Old Testament. You can look at prophecy and things taking place. But ultimately, as Scripture even says, if we don't have love in our heart, what do we have? See, we can be the most knowledgeable Christian in the world. Have you met some of those, you know? Like they know the Bible, okay? Like if you make a mistake at Bible study, they know. They know Scripture so well. But what happens if there is not love in your heart? It goes to waste. That love is the most important part. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. What does that look like then? Because he says it's the most important commandment. And what is amazing about this story is, remember, they would have known the Old Testament. They would have known prophecy. They would have known things to come. And Jesus is saying, no, the most important thing is love. And it's such a simple message, but I guess it takes us so long to put in practice. Because if you wanted to measure yourself, a scale of 1 to 10, on that journey, on that trajectory, what number would you give yourself? You know, God says, you know, just love God with all your heart, mind, body, soul. And would you say, oh, I'm about a 5? I'm about a 6. Who'd be saying about a 10? We've got 1. Well, we could all have a lesson from Jules later. It's a big thing because it's ultimately saying every aspect of your life needs to put God first. And that is easier said than done because we're so used to just compartmentalizing things, aren't we? Having different aspects of our life, putting this here, this there, that there, prioritizing different things. And God says, look, if you are going to put me first with everything, then every aspect of life has to matter. Now, he sets an interesting order, doesn't he, here? He puts the vertical relationship first. Because a lot of us, you know, you can see this online and you can just watch people debating or arguing, and we can sometimes let that second commandment overrule the first. Whereas he does set an order. He says, no, first it's got to be God. There's a vertical relationship that is established between us and the Creator. Then second is horizontal. You know, are we treating other people as we want to be treated. See, when you've ever been mistreated or put down or just something, discouraged, we can see that there's no life there, there's no fruit to that, right? So how we engage with other people, it really matters. So what do you think God's call and what would God's desire be for you right now? What would his heart be for you? What would his plan be for you? What's his trajectory? You know, do you ever ask these questions? Do you go into prayer and say, God, what do you want from me? Why am I here? Is there a specific purpose for me? See, generally, we're all sort of in the same boat. You know, we're all on this earth to experience and to become more like Christ. And we may experience that in different ways. We may be taking that journey in different ways, but ultimately, that is something that we all need to grapple with, to maybe grow in, to become more Christ-like. Is that okay? Need a bit more energy. Is that okay? Yes. See, who here values their comfort? Probably all of us. I don't know anyone that would be like, no, comfort, no, not interested. A lot of us, we value our comfort. And we will base decisions around that comfort. And I think that's relatively normal. But when we're trying to pursue God, to follow God, he is going to lead us into some situations where our comfort will not be his priority. Where his priority, he will care more about our character than he will our comfort. And that can be a tough thing to deal with. Because when we're going through it, it's really difficult. We know with Judah now, as you see how cheeky he is. He's, growing, getting stronger and faster, more cheeky every week. Where do they learn to be cheeky? It's like he just comes out with something new every week. He's been starting to tell us his imaginations must be growing, because he's been starting to tell us little stories, little tales. At the end of the day, we'll say, "Oh, have you had a good day today, Judah? What have you done?" And if he's been with Grandad, we'll say, "Oh, what have you and Grandad done?" And he'll say, "Well, we went on bus." I'm like, "You went on a bus?" He's like, "Yeah." "We went to see ducks." I'm like, you fed the ducks?" It's like, "Yeah." We text Grandad. No, we've not done any of those things today. Went to preschool, started up again on Friday. It just goes on Friday mornings. And we was a bit nervous for him, because he was telling us all over summer he didn't want to go back to preschool. And then the morning came and he was actually great, and he went in. But when Grandad was collecting him, the staff came to him and said, "Oh, you have a good time this afternoon? Judah has been telling us all how you're taking him to Gulliver's Kingdom this afternoon." Ken was like, "What?" So then he texted us, "Did you tell Judah that I'm taking him to Gulliver's Kingdom this afternoon?" We're like, No. I don't know where he's learning this stuff from, but he's starting to develop a bit of an imagination. And you can see now when we're trying to teach him, and he's only young, so you're very gentle and very patient, but as he grows, you want the best for them, and ultimately what is better for them is you want their character to be good. If you just said yes to absolutely everything, that would not be responsible parenting, would it? Would you tell me off if I just said yes to everything? The other day he told me he wanted to play with a knife. I said no. Would it have been good for me to just go, "Yeah, sure, there you go"? No, there'd have been people reporting it. That's not good. Sometimes being responsible, it means saying no. When you are more interested in someone's character, we will get no's. Sometimes when we're going to God and we're praying, "God, give me this, give me that," sometimes we will get a no, because he's working on our character. And as much as we love our comfort, as much as we value it, that is secondary to him. And that doesn't mean he's just up there wanting to give us all a tough time, but He wants to refine us. He wants to grow us. He wants to stretch us. So do not despise if you're in a stretching season. If you're in a season where there's a little bit of discomfort, if there's some tension, if you're having to get used to some new things, some new dynamics, just some new situations, God is more interested in your character than your comfort. You know, it can be a hard lesson, it can be a long lesson, but ultimately, it's worth it. Because it is through that we become more Christ-like. It is through that pressure that we become more Christ-like. And sometimes we need that pressure to just squeeze some things out of us that we don't need. You know, like an old sponge or you get to the bit with your toothpaste where there's almost nothing left and you're just having to squeeze it really hard to get the last bit out. Does anyone have that? Or have you've already prepared and you bought some new toothpaste long before that? Now, there's usually a few times when I'm just trying to get the last drop out. You need that pressure to just squeeze out what's there. And sometimes we surprise ourselves with what's in there. You come into a situation and you think, why did I react that way? What took over me? We need to just sometimes put that pressure, let it be applied to work on our character so that we can walk in these things, in the greater commandments, to love God with everything and to treat others as I want to be treated. Because if we aren't really prioritizing those basic things, then what is the point in building a further foundation? You know, when I was I had a Bible college. I went to work at a church in Cheshire for a little bit, and I won't name it because these things go online now. But when I was working down there, there was this lady, and she just prided herself on her spirituality, if that makes sense. Her identity was, I'm just very spiritual. Yeah? Have you've encountered the type before? And you know, she would often want to talk about prophecy and gifts, and you know, those things are great and we need those things. But she had this reputation in the church of perhaps being the most mean-spirited person there. Like, you know, if you go to talk to her, she was ready to just cut you down, okay? If something was wrong in her eyes, she would just cut you down. And it just gives you such a lesson, because really, was there love in that situation? Where was the love? And we can all grow cold over time, I think, can't we? You know, you come to Christ and maybe you have a radical encounter and just something overcomes you, the Holy Spirit overcomes you, and you let your heart be warmed by that love. But over time, you know, the years set in, life sets in, and we can become a little harder, a little colder, a little disillusioned. But if we don't check that, if we lose that intimacy, that love, that warmth, then I think we'll struggle to connect with people. I think we'll struggle to bring the message of the gospel to people. Because ultimately the gospel, it's not just something for us to just sit on, it's to share. Because the Bible is very clear that it is an eternity that's at stake, isn't it? And we don't always go on about it or speak of it, but we believe in an eternity. And we believe that the decisions we make right here in our relationship with God will affect that eternity. And that it's not just something for me, I'm in the club, but I want to give that, I want to share that with other people. But if my heart's grown cold, if I don't even care, how can I reach people with that message? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, body, mind, soul, with everything. And love your neighbor as yourself. Sometimes it's not about what we do, but who we are. And when we get that right, it will affect what we do. It will affect our actions. It will affect how we live. It will affect how we interact with people. Because we can probably all pick someone right now in our life that we would love to see God break through into their life in some way, where we need some healing or some release, or for just a connection, for them to just know God on a deeper level. And we can stand in the gap in prayer, but ultimately, we need that love. We need our heart to be warmed. Maybe some of us this morning, even if we're few in number this morning, maybe some of us, we just need to come to God in communion and say, God, will you just warm my heart again? Because if I'm being honest, I've just grown a bit cold, a bit apathetic. You know, when I talk about your gospel, there's just a sense in me where I'm a little indifferent. And I think, God, I want you to fix that. Will you just come, look at my heart, search my heart. And if you see any indifference, if you see apathy, will you just replace it with a hunger, with a heart, with a love to see people come to you? Because on Judgment Day, that scary day, when we stand face to face with God, when he peels back all the layers of our life, when he looks at us and sees us for who we are, what are the things that will really matter in that moment? If you think, if only I'd just made a little bit more money. Man, I regret not making a bit more money. Man, I regret that last promotion I never got. I mean, those things are great. But when you're stood face to face with the Creator, when he peels those things away, status, what are we going to be left with? When he looks at the heart, what will he see? Because all he's really looking for is if you can see himself in there. And that is the most important thing we can ever do. That there is so much value in that. That even if the world doesn't see it or acknowledge it, so what would he see? We're going to go into communion in a moment, and this has just been a real reminder. Just a little reminder as we go into the next season. You know, we over summer we've been everyone we have a bit of a rest and we chill out a little bit. September we tend to start to try and get things moving again, going into the next season, and we want to focus on our heart, focus on sharing the gospel. You know, what are ways that we can do that as individuals? How can we share the message that God's given us? How can we be ambassadors? How can we be messengers of this powerful thing we call the gospel? We're going to have communion in a moment, and use this opportunity to just pray that really brave prayer. God, search my heart. How am I feeling this morning? Where am I on the scale of love the Lord your God with everything and love your neighbor as yourself? Where am I on that scale? And God, can you just help me go up even just one notch, one increment, and see if it can just change the dynamics of my life?